Hello there and welcome to the Emerald Nightmare. My name is Tuskeh and in this video we are going to go over everything you need to know to defeat Ursoc in the Emerald Nightmare on normal and heroic difficulties. He's one of the 4 bosses that you must defeat in the Emerald Nightmare after Nithendra, and you can choose to do this in any order. Mechanically, Ursoc is very simple, but particularly on heroic, his mechanics will demand a fairly well-geared and competent damage-dealing team. So if you're struggling with defeating him before you run out of time, you might want to hold off until your raid team is in stronger gear. You'll be facing Ursoc in his lair in the corrupted version of the Grizzly Hills in a circular chamber. Ursoc is a one-phase fight with no adds, revolving around your raid team splitting into 2 groups to help mitigate the damage of his most lethal attack. Unlike the other bosses you've likely fought up to Ursoc, your damage is important. Your healers are going to struggle here, especially near the end of the fight. A typical composition of 2 tanks, 3 to 6 healers, and a mixture of ranged and melee damage dealers will suit you fine, but if you're struggling with damage and you're getting close to killing him, you might want to drop a healer and try to get through the fight with an extra damage dealer. For the tanks in this fight are 2 nasty debuffs, Rend Flesh and Overwhelm. Rend Flesh is a hard-hitting damage over time effect, and Overwhelm is a single, heavy hit that increases physical damage taken and dramatically increases the damage of Rend Flesh on the target, which will stack. The idea here is that no tank should ever have both debuffs at the same time, and we'll discuss how to handle this in the strategy section. Ursoc's most dangerous ability, by far, is Focused Gaze. He will select a random non-tank raid member, giving them a few seconds to react. After this short delay, he will charge at them with Trampling Slam, dealing fatally heavy damage. After he arrives at the player, he will use Barreling Impact, dealing deadly damage to the entire raid. However, both instances of this damage can be mitigated. Firstly, the charge's damage is reduced the further away Ursoc's target is from him. And secondly, the Barreling Impact damage to the raid is reduced the more players that Ursoc has to charge through to reach his target. However, when Ursoc charges through a player, they will be afflicted by momentum, increasing the damage they take from further charges by 500%, lasting for 50 seconds. Ursoc will use his charge more frequently than this, requiring your raid team to be split into 2 groups to mitigate the charges. Ursoc's only other ability is Roaring Cacophony. Ursoc rears up and roars, dealing extremely heavy damage to all players within 25 yards, split evenly among them. Every time he uses this ability, he will gain Echoes of Discord, increasing the damage he deals with Roaring Cacophony by 10%, stacking. This is the main danger of this fight. Being unable to kill Ursoc before he gains too many stacks of Echoes of Discord will be the biggest roadblock to a successful kill. However, on heroic, Roaring Cacophony has another mechanic. A couple of seconds after he roars, Ursoc will create a puddle of miasma at his feet. This pool of purple is permanent, and a non-targetable image of Ursoc will appear in its center, using a similar roar called Nightmarish Cacophony whenever Ursoc uses his Roaring Cacophony, dealing damage and fearing anyone within the miasma. For this reason, on heroic, Ursoc is going to steadily decrease the amount of room your raid team will have to fight him, and you'll have to move him and your team fairly regularly. Finally, at 30% health, Ursoc will enter a Blood Frenzy, increasing his attack speed and damage done significantly. This, on top of the Echoes of Discord stacks he'll have at low health, can be extremely dangerous. So those are all of Ursoc's mechanics. Now let's discuss strategy. This fight is about 2 things: heavy damage and handling mechanics properly. One misstep and multiple people are going to die. We used Bloodlust once Ursoc reached 30% health to get the fight over with as quickly as we could once he enraged, because this, by far, is the nastiest part of the fight. On the pull, our tanks would position him on the edge of the room, ready to be moved in a counterclockwise direction. Our raid team was split into 2 groups, not including the tanks, in order to soak the Focused Gaze charges. We had 1 player in each group marked to help people position themselves. The group assigned to soak the first charge stood on Ursoc's flank, in between him and the center of the room. The group not assigned to soak the first charge stood directly in front of Ursoc with the tanks. Since everyone was close by, everyone would split the damage of Roaring Cacophony. When this happened, we moved counterclockwise to avoid the miasma pools. You can move early here as soon as he finishes roaring to avoid taking the damage of the pool as it forms, since it spawns where Ursoc roared a couple of seconds after he finishes roaring. On normal mode, this mechanic isn't active, so you can keep Ursoc where he is for the entire fight. The tank mechanics in this fight seem complex at first, but in essence, it works like this. The first tank takes one hit of Overwhelm. The second tank taunts and takes Rend Flesh. The first tank taunts and takes the second hit of Overwhelm. The boss uses his charge, and the Rend Flesh on the second tank drops off. The second tank taunts as the boss returns, taking the next Overwhelm and allowing the debuff to drop on the first tank. The first tank then taunts for Rend Flesh, and the entire system flips on its head. The second tank taunts for the second Overwhelm, and the first tank taunts for the third Overwhelm as their Rend Flesh stacks fall off. This is a bit complex at first, but there is a much simpler means of handling it. This isn't what we did, but basically, when your other tank gets hit by a debuff, regardless of which one it is, you taunt. This should see you through the fight without getting destroyed, but you'll need to think on the fly here, as Ursoc will throw out these debuffs fairly regularly. Just remember the golden rule: a tank should never have both debuffs at the same time. Whenever Ursoc chooses a target with focused gaze, that player would run into the center of the room, as far away from Ursoc as possible. This would put the soaking group on the bear's flank in between the boss and his charge target, allowing them to soak the charge to lessen the damage of barreling impact. This burst of damage hits extremely hard even when soaked by half of the raid team, so healers beware. Damage mitigation is very nice here. Once a charge was soaked, the two teams swapped. The team not soaking had to be careful here, and once the boss started using his focused gaze, the tanks need to keep him still, as melee afflicted by momentum and not soaking could easily be hit by this if Ursoc was moving or they were simply too close, so it can be worthwhile to take a step back here to avoid getting clipped by the charge and being one-shot if you are struggling with this. That's the whole fight. Although Ursoc does enrage at 30%, the fight is essentially the same, it just hurts more. You're definitely going to want to be rolling cooldowns near the end of the fight, but that's going to depend on your healing and general raid composition. Ursoc is mostly about your damage dealers. The quicker they can defeat him, the easier this whole fight is going to be. So bring your best, and don't be stingy about flasks, potions, and augment runes. Handle his otherwise deadly mechanics without a mistake, and the healers should be able to make it through. That will conclude this guide. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, or suggestions, then you can contact me using the links in the description, or you can just leave a comment. If you want to help support the channel, then you can find a link to my Patreon page in the description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in the Emerald Nightmare.
Good job, guys.
Good job.
Asura's going out.